Hello, friends and families. Welcome to the Educa DPS podcast. My name is Javier Ibarra, Senior Manager of Media and Public Relations for Denver Public Schools. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Brooks Rosenquist Montalvo, very fancy name, Manager of Research and Evaluation. Brooks is going to tell us more about our topic today, which is DPS surveys, specifically Tu Voz, Your Voice survey. Brooks, welcome. How are you today?
Great, Javier. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Brooks, I know you're very passionate about what you do. Can you tell us more about your journey in education and what you do for DPS?
Sure. After I graduated from college, I pretty much went straight into teaching. I taught for about 10 years. I was really curious about what teaching and learning was like in different grades and different subjects. So I really did a lot of things. I actually started out teaching kindergarten, and I ended up after 10 years teaching high school math.
So you went the full spectrum.
I did. And then after that, I went back to the university to learn more about the best ways that students learn, about how schools and school districts can use data and statistics to improve their systems and improve student learning. And then after earning my master's and doctorate, then I moved here with my family to Denver to start working for Denver Public Schools. And I've been working with Denver Public Schools data and data systems for the last 7 years.
Wow. So you've been in education through and through. So
yeah, my whole life, either teaching or as a student.
As a student, right.
Always somehow connected with the school, yeah.
Well, I'm glad because we're going to touch on that a little bit in our later questions. But let's get into our topic for today. What is the DPS Your Voice, or in Spanish, Tu Voz Family Survey, and why is it important?
So we've always had in Denver Public Schools some different surveys trying to figure out, the satisfaction of the parents and the student experience. They would give feedback on the students and on the teachers and how things were going and how they can improve. And similarly, we've had always had surveys with our employees too, to try to give that similar kinds of feedback. And so Tu Voz is really the latest iteration of that. It's our school board and our superintendent, Dr. Morrow. For them, it's very important the experience of all of our stakeholders, especially our students. But we also want to take into account what our families experience and our employees experience. So this is our attempt to really put a number on those kinds of goals for improving the experience for all of those stakeholders.
As a family member or a student or an employee, why should I take the survey?
So there are a lot of ways to be involved and to give feedback for Denver Public Schools. We have a bunch of different committees and volunteer opportunities in different schools. But not everyone is able to participate in those, Javier. For some folks, the work hours just don't allow it, or their transportation might be an obstacle, or they might speak a language that is not English, and it might be very difficult for them to participate in all those opportunities. However, even though we have all of those kind of different ways of participating, different ways that DPS gathers data and information and feedback, we do find it very important to try to do some of these large district-wide surveys to really give everyone that can the chance to really provide that voice to give some feedback. And in that sense, we feel it is kind of one of the most democratic ways because, I think when you go to some meetings, you see that some voices seem louder than others. But in these surveys, everyone's voice really has the same weight. And so for that reason, and because we feel like we are trying to provide as many opportunities to take the survey, this is one that where really we can get some of the highest rates of participation and hopefully hear from everybody that is one of those important stakeholder groups.
Would you say that this is one of the equitable ways that DPS is moving forward to having families do these surveys?
I think it is. Like I said, we have multiple ways of trying to engage with and get feedback from and allow all of our stakeholders to participate. And even though sometimes it seems like you're always getting different surveys from different companies, and everyone wants feedback. But I think it's important to remember that DPS isn't one of those companies. This is really our institution. It's a public institution, and we all need to contribute to it. So I think that's one of the reasons why everyone's voice is really important. We do consider that the equity angle and trying to allow everyone to participate. That's actually one of the reasons why our surveys you can take it in any of 9 different languages, the most 9 common languages that are spoken in DPS.
Wow, that's amazing. That's great to remind our families that the survey is in your language so that you can feel free to respond and learn in your language. What did Nelson Mandela said, speak to someone in a language they understand, it goes to their head, but if you speak to them in their language, it goes to their heart.
That's a great point.
Yeah. My next question for you is, why does DPS have so many surveys?
I think that when I think back to a few years ago when we were in COVID, I know that we were sending surveys much more frequently than we do now. I think that was a time when we were dealing with a situation where things were changing so frequently, depending on the different policies and the different ways that we thought were safe or not safe. There was a lot of debate about when to bring students back, which ones. We started with, especially for the youngest learners, we tried to keep them mostly in face-to-face education and not virtual education. And so, for us at the district, when we were dealing with these situations we've never dealt with before, we really needed to get feedback much more frequently to try to figure out the best thing to do and try to figure out what our families were most comfortable with, whether that being coming back in person or not, wearing masks, things like that. So I think that from that time we all got a little bit burnt out, not only on surveys but a lot of other things. Right. So we are mindful of that, and we are trying to limit these large district-wide surveys to 1 or at most 2 times a year.
Right. So it's very important that they fill out the one that's coming up, because we've reduced the number of surveys, so therefore we really want to get their input.
That's right, Javier. And our next one in our current schedule, the next family survey of this size will be in the winter. So this is one opportunity we have now, and the next one won't come around until next winter. So I would really love to see as many families participating now and not having to wait for 6 months from now to really weigh in on all these topics we ask about.
Going back to specifically to the Tu Voz or Your Voice survey, what are some of the questions that folks can expect to see on that?
As I mentioned, we have 3 different surveys, one for the students, one for families, and the third for our employees. I'll speak mostly to the family one, just because I feel like that's probably most relevant to most of the viewers and listeners. So in our family, our goal have been laid out by our superintendent, Dr. Morero, in terms of the family experience is primarily to make sure that the families feel welcome in the school. And that can look like, the fact of just feeling welcome, to make sure that when they come into the schools, they're treated respectfully and cordially, and that they're also allowed to communicate at that school in a language that they understand and they feel comfortable with. So that's really first and foremost. And then we dive a little bit deeper into communication. Really have the expectation that schools will be communicating with family members about the progress of their students, their particular strengths, weaknesses, things they might need to work on, their celebrating their successes, but at the same time, also providing opportunities to participate in decision making in the school and just to know generally what's going on. We feel like that communication is a key part of the family experience.
You touched on this a little earlier, but around the questions, something that families might ask is, what do you do with the data that you collect?
My team and myself, we write a series of reports. We do a district-wide report for the superintendent and the school board and other district leaders, so they can see the overall picture of the district. And then we also generate school-specific reports because we feel it's really important for the principals and other school leaders to get the feedback to find out how their families are feeling, to see if they can sometimes compare from their previous results and see if they have in fact become like more welcoming, or if families are feeling less welcome for some reason, or if they've been communicating more, if they've been communicating less. So all of that data goes not only to the district leaders, but to each and every school principal. In addition, we think it's important to show that we're transparent in our reports. So also on our district website, we do have a place where anyone in the public can access the results from the family and student surveys.
Oh, wow. So it's very transparent for everyone to see across the board.
Yes, that's our hope.
Without collecting, the personal information sort of thing.
Correct. These surveys are completely anonymous. Your individual responses are kept confidential.
That's fantastic. That way we are able to collect everyone's voice in a manner that they feel comfortable with.
Exactly, and have some confidence that they feel comfortable responding in an honest way about their experience.
My next question for you is, how can folks provide feedback to the district about things that are not necessarily on that survey? What are some of the ways that, as a community member, I could provide feedback?
So one of the ways that we are able to take some of that feedback and do some of that data gathering outside the survey is through our FACE department, right? Our Family and Community Engagement Department. And they have a telephone number that is set up specifically for that purpose to help people resolve their questions or any issues or any problems they have, be it with their particular school or with some district policy more generally.
What is your strategy to gather survey responses from all students and families?
So for our students, and this goes for our, this also goes for our employees, the students and employees have DPS emails. And so for the students and employees, we send them the links to the survey through their email. The youngest DPS students, ages ECE, right, early childhood education, kindergarten, first and second, they don't take the survey. Our students start in third grade, and we know that for some of our third graders, they might not check their email every day. They might not know how to check it. But for those, we're working with the schools, for those youngest students, working with the schools to have their teachers help them learn to do that.
I think that's a testament on how far we've come when it comes to collecting information from our students. I was a DPS student once, long time ago, and the simple fact that you're saying, well, we reached out to them and they have emails and they can answer the survey is a very cool idea to me, because you're collecting it from our students and you're collecting it from our employees and our families. So we're going to get a real good picture of what's going on in DPS and what they're saying about DPS.
Yeah. I did want to mention for our, so our families, it is a little bit different situation because clearly our families don't have their own DPS email.
Sure.
So for our families, the best ways are through School Messenger for those families that are in School Messenger. We're also going to have that information, the links to the survey available on Facebook and Twitter, as well as a number of different, all the family members signed up for different newsletters. They can find them there, as well as the DPS website in general.
So there are multiple ways that we are contacting our families to gather this information and take this survey.
Exactly.
Thank you. My last question for you is this. Who can we contact if we have questions about the survey specifically?
So as I mentioned, for things outside the survey, if there's something that's that a family member would like to talk to someone in the district about that is not specifically survey related, those questions are best directed to that FACE number I told you about earlier. However, if a lot of times We have questions specifically about the survey. A lot of times, maybe some technical questions, problems about exactly how to access it. And for that, we actually have a survey email. It's surveys@dpsk12.org.
Well, thank you so much for this information, Brooks. I want to thank you for coming on and talking about a very important topic to the district and to our superintendent. Friends and families, this concludes our Educa DPS podcast for today. I want to ask you all to help share this content with families, with friends, and other community members, very specifically about today's topic because it's your voice, tu voz. For more content and more Educa content and other stories, visit our YouTube channel at Denver Public Schools Plus. It is very important to us here at Educa and here at the multimedia team to give credit where credit is due to all the people behind the scenes who contribute to making all of the DPS multimedia productions. Starting off with our executive director, Will Jones. Thank you to our director of external communications, Scott Privel. Thank you to our Director of Internal Communications, Selena Nakamura. The great Don Pierce, our executive producer and videographer of this podcast and many more productions. Our own Beto Gaitan, our multimedia lead producer and host of the Spanish Educa. Hannah Young, our guru of social media. Georgia Alexander, our communication specialist. Trey Hill, our strategic communication specialist, and April Spites, our graphic designer. A very special shout out to our DPS educators, students, and parents. And a big thank you to our superintendent, Dr. Alex Marrero, as he says, proud superintendent of Denver Public Schools, for supporting the Educa and all of our platforms. Yours truly, Javier Ibarra, Senior Manager of Media and Public Relations, as well as the Educa host in English. Please remember to tell your children more often, I believe in you and I know you can do it. Until next time.